Okay.
Well, an official good afternoon to everybody. We're the Community Grants Advisory Committee, and we're meeting today to discuss the applications for 2021 grant funds. And we need to get things started formally, don't we? Does that mean calling the meeting to order, perhaps?
Call the meeting to order, yep.
Okay, let's call the meeting to order. And where do we start, Steph?
Let's start with approval of the agenda.
Okay.
So I have one late item for the agenda. That's the evaluation sheet that will be shared on screen. That's just for information for committee members.
Okay, thanks, Steph. So can I get a motion to approve the agenda for today's meeting? Thank you, Michael. And a second.
Andrea, may I make the motion that we approve today's agenda with the late item included?
Yes, you may. Thank you, Michael. Who's going to second that? I see Michelle. Thanks.
All in favor?
All in favor. We're all in favor, I think.
Yep. And then next we're going to be adopting the minutes from the last meeting.
Okay. Now I'm just going to be absolutely honest and say I don't have those in front of me, but I'm going to get them very quickly in front of me. I just realized.
You will have signed off on those. It's the others.
Yes, I have seen. I just don't have them in front of me. But in any event, do others have them there?
Sufficiently to say that I'm quite prepared to forward that for recommendation that we approve the minutes from the last meeting.
Thank you, Michael.
To second that, because I found them very accurate and well done.
Yeah. And
all in favor?
All in favor? Okay. Me too.
Great.
And sorry, everybody. I've got too many screens going on. One of them, which I'm trying very hard to ignore. Just one moment.
I think the first two items were more information for the committee, the grant history and the excerpt of the allocations of the 2020 grants.
Here we go. Just one second. Okay. I apologize.
No public comments, do we?
No.
No, so we can move on to number 4. The background information and the excerpt from the June 22, 2021 regular council meeting on the allocation.
So those are just background information for committee members. They often ask about what happened last year or what's happened previously. So I don't know that those need to be discussed.
I don't think unless somebody has something they'd like to raise. No, I'm looking at you, Bobby. You look happy. Yeah. Okay. And now we're into the grant applications themselves for 2021. Okay. How do we?
Aoife at that point? Aoife can.
Yeah. So
yeah. Do you want to speak to that, Aoife?
Sure. Yeah. So all in all, we received 10 applications in. There is a 0.5.2, there was 2 later items received from the Caring Circle Health and Wellness Society of Bowen Island that were later added. But all in all, there were 10 full applications in. And what I have prepared is a short summary of those applications and the total amount requested. Unfortunately, the total amount requested far exceeds what we have in the budget for this grant cycle. The amount budgeted for 2021 is $41,400. We had a request in for $126,000. So in order to help us go through the discussion of each of the applicants and to help you as a committee come up with your final recommendation for council, we have a workbook that we like to use, and thank you all for your scores and evaluations. I'll just take you through the workbook and the summary. We'll start off with the summary. I'll just share screen if everyone's okay with that. Sorry, just make sure I get the right one. Is my screen coming up?
Yeah, it looks good, Aoife.
Great. So here we have the applications in order of receipt, the organization names and the amounts requested for the 2021 community grants program. And so as we scroll down through here, we can see these are the 10 applications in total, and these are the amounts that were being requested for various different projects or operational funding, for the total amount, as I mentioned earlier, of $126,000. We know that the amount available per the budget is $41,400. So the request in excess of available funding is $84,600. So what we next asked the committee to do once all the evaluations were in and once all of the applications were in, we combined all 10 into a binder, and everybody received a binder a number of weeks ago, which also included an evaluation sheet. How the evaluation sheet works is there are criteria specific to this program, and the criteria have a weighting where you can mark an applicant out of a marking of 5. And so all of those combined results came in, and they were all combined and drafted into what we can use as a tool. It is by no means a final award, or it's by no means any indication of any guarantee of any award. It's purely for discussion purposes only. So we can combine what the committee as a group, when you combine everyone's results, how this comes in here. So just to explain this page a little bit before I let you discuss each applicant, what's happened here is in this column, you have all of the community grant applicants. So there's applicants 1 to 10. This figure here in green, it's not an award amount. It is the combined average of what the committee scores resulted back in. So 6 members of the committee sent in their awards with their combined scores. And those scores are averaged here for purposes of discussion only. Again, I just want to reiterate, this is just a draft. The recommendation for council, once we're finished our discussion, once the committee is complete, we'll be going into this column, and that will form part of the report that goes to council. And so these are ranked in order of what the potential scores came out as from the top to the bottom. Again, is there any questions on this particular working?
I do have a question. It's Penny.
Yeah, please.
The amount in the not award column, is that based on a percentage of the total, or how did you, or is that just an average of the amounts each member?
Yeah, so six committee members sent in what they felt various different applicants should receive. And what we've done is we've summed each of those 6 awards and we've divided them by 6. So it's an average amount.
So those recommend, it could have been anything from 0 to 15, the individual responses, right?
Correct. And so this is an average. So what this sheet doesn't tell you is potentially one of these applicants may have only received 3 award recommendations and 3 $0. So what it does here is it just gives you a combined average of what 6 committee members, when you total everything together, what that will give you. Does that help, Penny?
Yes, thanks very much.
Okay, no problem. And so the final total amount of that is in or around our budget amount. So again, in this column here is where we would potentially at the end of the discussion of the committee, I can complete these amounts in here. So it's probably, if anyone else has any other questions, otherwise I might stop share until we discuss each of the applicants, and then we can come back to these, to the actual award amount.
Yeah, that sounds good, Aoife. Thank you.
Okay, sure. Okay, thank you.
So at this stage, I propose that we just start working through the 10 applications, if that suits everybody. What we might do is just have a quick discussion about each with if I remember from years past, we sort of have a rough idea about what the range might be. And then once we've been through all 10, we can start really, we can get out our calculators and start making some bigger decisions and making sure that we don't exceed the grant monies that we have to give. Would that be okay? Okay. And I think what we'll do, as we have in the past, is rather than insist on going around the circle for each application, is invite people to comment as they feel, as they would like to on each one. So don't feel you have to comment on every one, but you're most free to comment on every one. So we begin with the caring circle. And that's the application for $15,000 for the costs of the program director. Just going to get that up in front of me as well. Does anyone have any comments on this application?
If I may, Andrea.
Please.
Yeah. Just for the future, not for this year, I might ask if this group feels comfortable doing this, make a recommendation for Caring Circle, who come to us every year for a more sustainable form of funding. I feel that in this island, they perform an invaluable service, yet technically speaking, they're not actually available. What they do doesn't render them, strictly speaking, affordable for regular financing. However, it might be helpful if, when we complete our recommendations, we actually make a recommendation to council that they look at ways in which Caring Circle could be financed, and take it, if you like, away from this group, because very few people would deny them significant funds, and yet you can see what a large percentage it is of the whole. So my thoughts is, not for now, but maybe if I could make a note at our final meeting, when you come up with your recommendations, that council finds an alternative way of financing, rather than asking these people to go through this every year. They've got, honestly, better things to do than go through this. And if you're agreeable to that, we'll deal with it this year.
Michelle?
I was under the impression that we agreed on this last year, actually. So I'm surprised. I was very surprised to see them in the mix again this year, given the fact that we had much of this conversation last time.
Yeah, I think what we didn't do, and I'm quite prepared to take the rap on this one, I don't think we actually came forward with a formal recommendation to council from this group that they consider this matter. And I think that's why we need to put something in writing to council and actually lay it out as a formal recommendation from the group that we move ahead. So it doesn't, as can easily happen, fall between the cracks on very lengthy agendas.
I'm happy to take the rap for that. And forgive me if I mean, I should know this, I guess, but what's the threshold for Caring Circle to be considered for core funding?
I don't think necessarily it'll be reviewed on its merits, and we will have to discuss it. I believe traditionally we have accorded somewhere between 12 and 15,000, and I may be a little bit off, but in a sum of about that amount. So we'll be talking, obviously, in the future of an amount of that, and then we will have to look at it as part of the budget process and see if there's another way of doing it, because it isn't under small grants. It's a very significant amount of money, and we're just something that council needs to take a decision on.
Sorry, my question was really, I know that the Arts Council, there are bodies that have now secured core funding. So my understanding, Michael, that these amounts being asked aren't big enough to qualify for that core funding, or council just hasn't moved this organization into that bucket yet?
We haven't moved it into that bucket yet, and there may be some discussion around it, but it's something that I believe we should be talking about and dealing with. And your recommendation will assist, whether we treat it method A or method B, but give it sustainable funding, whichever, we'll talk to Raj, of course, and say, how would we approach this as part of the budget process, etc.
Yes, the same could be true, of course, as you've pointed out, Michael, for Family Place. So if it's okay with everybody, let's park that issue for once this year's grants have been determined, and then consider a recommendation to council for 2022. Would that be okay?
That's absolutely perfect, and thank you.
Okay. So let's.
Can I just provide? Can I just provide you with some additional information just to answer some of your questions, Andrea, that you had? So one of the reasons why Caring Circle in the past hasn't gone into the multi-year core grant, because essentially we award grants in two ways. There's a multi-year core grants, which are issued for a 4-year term of council. Typically, they're aligned with a council term, and those are the terms of reference for issuing those. One of them is that it's a service that is typically or otherwise provided by a municipality. So that's why Caring Circle didn't qualify in the past, because it didn't meet that term of reference in terms of a service otherwise provided. So we'll find vehicles and ways of perhaps that. So we'd have to take a look at the definition of what type of service a municipality typically provides, just building on what Michael was saying, given the unique service that Caring Circle provides on Bowen and how Bowen would be left without health care. So that's why it hasn't been the dollar amount that has been the threshold in the past. It's been the type of service.
It's the nature of the service. That makes sense. Thanks, Raj. Okay, great.
Thanks, Roger.
Okay, so the merits of this year's Caring Circle application. Would anyone like to wade in? Yeah, Michelle.
I think it's a fine application. I think the Caring Circle puts together a very, very strong package. I think they make a compelling case for the fact that they serve a very broad constituency. They work with programming that can potentially affect all different segments of the island population. They're asking for just a portion of the director's salary. And I think they do a very good job of explaining all of the different ways that they make an impact and do valuable input, do valuable work here on Bowen. My only concern with this application at all was the fact that I had understood that we were asking the council for a different stream of funding for this from this year. So I was surprised to see it again. And in terms of the criteria, the one thing it really just doesn't do a good job of addressing is financial sustainability. They're here every year asking for funding, and that's not really their fault because that's how they've been set up. But they aren't becoming a freestanding, financially independent organization. And so if we're anticipating that they need to do that, it's not really fair for us to judge them that way. So I think it's a strong application. I think that we should fund them as highly as we can and continue allowing them to do that work on the island.
Yeah, I had one comment to add to that is that they also struck me as one of the applicants that has clearly been providing a very strong response over the last year to COVID, and really meeting a very particular and kind of, a greater need than ever. So I just wanted to acknowledge that COVID factor in this application. Any other comments? Am I hearing then that sort of subject to number crunching, and I don't mean to be crass about it, but we'll have to crunch numbers at some point, but subject to number crunching, the group is sort of tentatively, if we had 15, we would give this amount? Okay, so why don't we just pop in 15 for now and we'll see where we end up there. Okay. The next application is the Bowen Island United Church, an application for also for $15,000 to build an office space for three purposes, as I understand it: for pastoral services, for the music director's use, and for some of the administrative purposes around the food bank. Okay. I'd like to comment on this one.
Penny, sorry, Andrea, if I may, the one thing in my note I did send to you is that the church, like one or two others, do get permissive tax exemption from council. And really that means, in essence, they pay no municipal taxes on their properties, which also means that other people, in terms of the total tax, that is distributed out to others. So just so you realize the fact that they are receiving that benefit already.
So Michael, from your perspective, would that affect any amount they'd be given, or are you arguing that they perhaps in future should not be entitled to ask for grant monies for these sorts of things?
I think it's for individual consideration for everybody on the committee, that just to let you know that they are already benefiting from this. So it is not as though they haven't been reached out to and a benefit being accorded to them, because it has.
Thank you. Okay. I'm happy to kick this one off. I thought this was a very well put together proposal, and I think the United Church obviously is a strong organization in our community. However, for me, as we were looking at some pretty significant projects on this list, it did occur to me that the primary need for this particular office this year is to meet the needs of the congregation itself rather than a broader community need. And that congregation, I think I'm right, is about 60 strong in total. And because of that, I propose that this might be an application that we might not fund this year, just because there are so many other projects that are meeting very immediate and sort of COVID-soaked needs this year. My other thought too is that clearly the pastoral services and the music services are being delivered now. It's not as though the funding is going to prevent those services from happening. And I'm sure there'll be a time when this project gets up and running. I'm just not sure. For me, I wasn't sure it's a 2021 funding project, but I'm interested in others' thoughts.
I would say I agree with you, Andrea. I very much appreciate the church's work with the food bank. I think that's a very commendable endeavor that they are in charge of. But when it comes to looking at the need of other grant applications that we're seeing right now, and like you pointed out, that their services are continuing right now, that maybe office space isn't really the best use of grant funds at this moment.
Michelle.
Oops.
I would counter that. I think that I do sort of agree with what's been said. I think office space isn't necessarily the most compelling reason, and they seem to be sort of chugging along somehow at the moment. But I think actually the fact that they're hosting the food bank is massive. The food bank is something that is supporting some of our most vulnerable residents on Bowen Island, and it needs to be somewhere, and the Little Red Church is hosting it at the moment, and without any good space to keep it running. And I think that during, even though they didn't expressly mention this and they didn't connect the dots themselves, in fact, the pastoral services that they're providing are probably as critical as anything during COVID, much like the mental health counseling that the Caring Circle is doing, the provision of a space and the possibility of providing support to people who are in crisis for whatever reason, but including during COVID, I think is relevant. And I actually ranked this one relatively highly amongst all of mine because of those reasons. I felt that they really do have access between those three things, the music, the pastoral services, and the food bank, to significant people broader than just their immediate membership of the church, but broader into the community, people who are in need, and they have the ability to better support people if they have space to do it in.
To be clear, though, the pastoral services is a community for a community of 60, as opposed to the Caring Circles mandate, which is to serve a community of 4,000.
Sure, no, sure.
Yeah,
But
okay.
also the food bank is largely what I'm arguing is that pastoral services is secondary, and the food bank is supporting some of our neediest people, and they don't have a space to provide any administration for that. I think that's significant.
Any other thoughts? Penny, are you with us?
I think Penny has her hand up.
Penny's got her hand.
Oh, I'm sorry. I can't see that on my screen. I'm sorry.
I hopefully you can hear me.
We can, yes.
Great. I just want to.
We've just lost you, Penny.
Everyone's spoken, and I agree on both sides. I think the deciding factor for me was that the counseling can still go on in the church, and I believe, and maybe someone can clarify, that the food bank does receive funding. I know it receives private funding, but does it also receive municipal funding in any way?
I don't know the answer to that. Yeah.
Penny, the answer to that is no.
No.
So it has, it's got that, they've got the devoted space for the food bank. I guess just not a sort of a desk to, or an office to manage it in. But I think they're funding the space that they're using now for it. Yeah. Okay.
It might be interesting if it was, if the application was made on behalf of the food bank, or, specifically.
Yeah. It was, yeah. I mean,
Certainly.
for those of you, I mean, Michelle, you said this ranked fairly highly for you. I mean, this was one that I said, that I suggested no funding this year. What was your thought on funding? Just so we can get some parameters going.
I suggested funding it fairly highly. I suggested 10 out of the $15,000 that they requested. Although I did have a question noted in my notes of wondering whether it's kind of an all or nothing proposal. If we don't fund them fully, is this going to go down in flames, or was just this going to help it along and they'll probably be able to go ahead? At some point, funding someone with $1,000 or $2,000 or $5,000 may not make any difference at all to them, and they may not be able to proceed. And so I guess my question is that the case here, or do they have enough other resources that if we gave them a smaller amount, they would be able to trend along somehow? And I don't know if there's any way to find that out.
I guess the challenge too in sort of parsing or separating out the pastoral services from the kind of admin needs, I find it very tricky because as we've talked about on the pastoral front, I get that that's what you want the space for. And it is nice to have private dedicated space, although as we've discussed, that smaller community may not be a priority. However, the admin, $10,000, I don't mean to be cheeky, but if somebody's sort of managing the food bank's admin from their kitchen table or home office, the difference between that happening that way or in a new office on site, I'm just not as convinced that that's a compelling reason. If we're all agreeing that supporting the food bank's needs are the most important to this group, then that doesn't feel very compelling in and of itself to me. So I don't know where to, any thought, where should we, go Bobby, what should we write what should we pencil in for now?
I also, Andrea, I was with you. I also didn't award it any funding. I think for a similar reason of, for this type of project, it felt a little all or nothing. And in the application, I didn't see any, that they had accumulated any funds or they had any plans for other ways to raise funds. So because it is a building project, it did feel to me too like it was kind of a all of it or none of it situation, particularly in, you know, the 1 year time frame to, you know, build a project, to line up trades, to get it all going, and then also to not have the whole thing funded. It didn't feel kind of together enough to then can also consider a smaller amount. So I also went with 0 this year. I think maybe with more planning and a show of maybe some fundraising for another year, it would be, maybe be considered, and maybe showing how more services would be used in this space could be a consideration. But for right now, I think it would be a 0 for me as well.
And perhaps with a focus in a future application on the broader community purpose, you know, help us fund that broader community purpose, even if it's a combined purpose, focusing more on the broader one. I should have mentioned that Yvonne McSkimming had comments on this one. She proposed a $5,000 being given on the basis that the church serves a vast and diverse range of island residents. And I'm reading between the lines, but I think she must be referring there to the food bank, but maybe not. And her thought, I think along with yours, Bobby, was that she was looking to see more of a fundraising. She was looking for some fundraising on their part in order to give more than that.
So one thing I might suggest as a way forward is I hear what all of you are saying, and I do agree that in all of the years that we might be considering things, maybe this is not the year for this project. And so we had some things last year that we kind of said that too as well. Like in the midst of this terrible global pandemic, maybe this is not the year to do, you know, X. And so I would not necessarily object. While I did rank this one pretty highly, I would not necessarily object to putting it aside if we can be sure and convey some of the feedback that we're saying to them. So it's not like thumbs down, you're out of here. But look, we actually were pretty sympathetic for this project. We just didn't have the budget this year. These are some things you might think about strengthening it. If we can really make sure that we're going to convey some of that along, then I sure, let's just move on and keep going, because we have sort of an impossible budget this year, and there's, you know, giving everybody 1/10 of the pie often doesn't make any sense at all. So I think that it would make more sense to ask them to come back in a year and try again then with perhaps a different context.
Thanks, Michelle. So for now, a 0 amount there, with the proviso that they hear our support for the project in general, that we offer some feedback, that hearing greater detail about their fundraising plans for the future, and also making that distinction between the functions of the space for that smaller community as opposed to the wider Bowen community, that we want to hear the specifics in particular about how it will support the food bank. Okay, thanks. Next is the BowFest request. This was for $4,000 to support a musical performance in August during BowFest. As I read the application, it appears that the $4,000 is needed whether or not, I wasn't 100% clear, but whether or not it's a virtual event or a live event. Although I wasn't 100% sure about that, because I think when it's a live event, there's door sales to fund this sort of thing. But who wants to start this one? And if Penny's hand is up, I can't see it, Aoife, so you have to let me know. Well, or Penny, just speak up.
Yeah, I didn't put my hand up, but
okay.
I'm happy to kick this one off.
Go.
Let me just see. Yeah, I wasn't sure either if this was based on whether it would be a virtual event, which I
So yeah, so if I can help clear that up, I think that the plan was for a live concert
versus a
be online.
right? Sorry, yeah, versus online.
No, it's actually, just to be clear, they say if we can offer it live, the funds would support the all-day presentation of music at Bowfest Field. So I think it's in either event. I should have.
Right. Yeah, no,
We've lost you again,
budget would
Penny.
change, but doesn't sound like it.
Okay.
Okay, I'm gonna have to find a better internet connection.
No,
I
we can
think.
hear you now. I'm sorry.
Okay.
You just dropped out for a minute.
And the question that I was left with is, where are the sponsorship dollars for this? And where's the other fundraising to come to us for the full amount? I did support it, but not at the full amount.
Okay. Thank you. Anybody else?
I'm quite frankly pleased to see a little bit of support here. You know, anything which in this year provides a little, frankly, a little entertainment, liveliness, jollity, I kind of by instinct tend to support. And the amount asked for was more in line, I thought, with the small grants, because they're asking for a smaller amount.
Okay. Go, Michelle.
I was sort of inclined to support this one at a slightly lower level. I feel like given the confines this year with our budget, I wasn't sure we could justify $4,000, but I thought $2,000 might be reasonable. I think that their plan is to provide honoraria for musicians and musical production, and whether they do that online or at an all-day event, they're going to have a need for that. I was pretty underwhelmed, frankly, by their application. The responses were very short, and they had an unusually bad evaluation section. Didn't mention COVID at all, although it's sort of assumed that it's playing a role. So I didn't think it was a great application, but I think that it could be a good sort of uplifter to the community if we can help this take place this year. And so I think that it probably deserves some support.
I'm just going to finish that arc, and then I'd love to hear from you, Bobby, because I'm sort of on the other side. So I wasn't sure. I agree with Penny that there didn't seem to be much discussion of sponsorships or even the idea of ticket sales. And Lord knows we've all chipped in $5 and $10 and $20 or pay what you can for online concerts as well. So it wasn't clear to me why if it is an online concert, we wouldn't be at least invited to contribute to the cost of the event if it's online this year. And of course, if it is live, then there's the sales at the door. So although I'm very nervous about, I know there has been a Bowen tradition of asking musicians to donate their time and talent to these things. I would hate to see that. I guess I feel there are other ways to raise at least some of the money. I hear Michelle's point of maybe some, not all, but some. But again, because things were so brutal on this list, this was one that I didn't propose to fund. Yeah. Bobby.
I proposed to give, I think it was $2,000 to give some money. I definitely hear the comments about maybe showing some more effort in fundraising in other ways. Personally, Bowfest has been such an important part of my family's life since moving to Bowen Island, and it's heartbreaking that we haven't had it now for 2 summers. So just personally, I know that my family and, it's been such a huge part of our lives here. So I want to support it in that way. And I think that it's such a huge volunteer commitment. And we all know what volunteering on Bowen can be very taxing. And so I wonder if maybe there's a bit of fatigue from the Bowfest volunteers in where they're at right now for being a live event and going into year 2. So I'm sympathetic to that. It's a really challenging time to be a volunteer in this type of organization. So I would love to support it in any way to keep going, and maybe give them some comments of ways we think that might help them to get to that 4,000 if they need it. But I would like to contribute a small amount to help them, and if in some way also to then support musicians and artists in our community as well, as still somehow coming together to provide that for the community.
Okay, so I'm trying to read the room. Maybe should we write down 2,000? Would that seems to keep everyone happy? Okay, great. All right. So next is Island Pacific Schools request for $10,000 for to support to subsidize students in the form of financial aid, which is, I guess I don't guess, we know that the demand for financial aid has grown through this COVID time.
Andrea, could I just point out that, like the Little Red Church, they are also get the tax break from municipality as well for everybody's information. So they do not pay the municipal taxes. So they are supported to that extent. It was also raised by a couple of councillors last year that this is a private school. And I'm going to have to, again, that's just for people's comments for consideration, but those were the thoughts on this application.
Just one other thing I thought it worth mentioning, because I noticed it last year as well. There wasn't a distinction last year or this year between funding for students from Bowen Island versus students from the city, which is something that mattered to me for sure. So we can assume this would be for any student, whether, and I think it's about 50-50 off island and on island students.
I think they didn't technically say that the funding would be earmarked specifically for island students, but they did actually say that most of it would go to island students somewhere.
Oh, I didn't see that. Okay.
Yeah, I made a note of that in the notes that I read.
Oh, it says majority of our aid and bursaries go to Bowen Island students. Yeah.
So it's not promising that it would necessarily, but it's indicating that that's the intention normally. Yeah, I remember we spoke about this at some detail last year. My feeling about this one was, again, one that was maybe worth partial support. My sense is that this is a case where it's not all or nothing, like whatever it is that they receive, they could pass along. And so they don't necessarily need to receive the full amount that they've requested in order to have an impact. My only real concern with this is because I'm a huge believer in financial aid for education. I think that's great. You know, they talk about how their enrollment's down and their fundraising efforts have been hindered by COVID. And they paint a little bit of a dire situation about their finances. And I wish they would have said a little bit more about what they're doing to resolve that, because they're certainly not going to get enough funding from this to carry them through hard times. This is a very smallish amount that they're requesting. So if they're really worried about their financial viability, I wish they had had more of a plan to talk about it.
I have to say that I expressed this view last year, and my son has been a student at this school. I love this school a lot. I don't feel 100% comfortable offering community grants to fund places at a private school on the island. And for that reason, I proposed no grant. Penny or Bobby?
This was a real hard one for me, because I also think it's a fantastic school, wonderful school. But I was at the same time torn with this being the place where we make up their bursaries, which I think is an important program. I'm sympathetic to what has happened in the last 2 years to some students. And I would hate for students' lives to have to change because their family's no longer able to afford tuition. But I part of me feels the same way, Andrea, where it's hard for me to reconcile this being the place where we get that financial help. So I did award some, but I looked to what happened last year in the grants that were awarded to kind of inform, because it was a tough one for me to make a decision. So I would certainly support not giving any funds to this, but I would also be easily convinced to put something in. This is a challenging one for me to make a decision on.
I'll just offer Yvonne's comment. She's suggested not awarding funding, and make similar comments to you, Bobby, and I guess to me that, there's no doubt it's a wonderful school. Her reflection was that the number of families in need here would be fairly small compared to other organizations who've applied who are serving a much larger and diverse group of families who may be marginalized right now, especially during COVID. So that was Yvonne. Penny, anything or?
Yeah, no, thanks. I'm happy. I think alternative education on the island. And I really have, I'd love to support this. I did put in partial funding based on that fact, but I also worry about long-term self-sustainability. This is the second year in a row that they've applied for funds, and these funds aren't necessarily meant to be sort of ongoing.
Yeah. Okay. So
are partial support.
Okay. Are we okay? So of the Michelle and Penny were in favor of some partial support. A few of us no support. Do we want to put a little range? Are we happy to put? What were you thinking, Michelle and Penny?
I supported it at 5,000, but I also agree. I think Michelle mentioned to sort of average out and split the funds among a lot of organizations is not necessarily going to meet anyone's needs. So if the majority has not provided funding, then I would go with that majority.
Michael, where do you stand on the actual number? You're muted.
Sorry, I rated this as a 0 just largely because of the points. I don't want to see very small amounts being given out, because I don't think will work. And so reluctantly, because I agree with you about being a great place, I rated it a 0.
Well, let's put it there for now. And as Michelle's pointed out, when we start crunching numbers, if there's money to offer, then we know a place it might go. Okay. Okay, Family Place has applied for 10,000, the same as last year. Sorry, just getting that up and running here. In my workbook or my binder. Okay. And why don't I bring Yvonne into the picture because I don't want to forget this time. So for Family Place, Yvonne suggested an award of the full amount. And like Michael is raising a concern about Caring Circle and Family Place being organizations which are, becoming or clearly reliant on this funding. It's not their fault, as we know, but she recommended the full amount just because of the large constituency that's being served across the island. And I agreed with that. I think in the end, as I was crunching numbers, I suggested less than 10 just to try and make it all work. But if I could, I'd make it 10. Yeah.
Andrea, I certainly would make space as with the previous. This year, I personally would support the 10,000. And again, this will be another subject for a recommendation to council when we've wrapped up our meetings. That would be my personal position. I'm trying not to sway this group in any way, but that's just from me as an individual, not as a council member.
Well, and Yvonne didn't note this, but for me, I feel like this Family Place is clearly an organization that has also had to really step up during COVID, be creative and reach out to families, especially women and people who have been isolated at home. And by all accounts, they've done a terrific job. So even more than normal.
Yeah, I was suitably impressed with their efforts to pivot and respond to COVID and to support the mental health of many families isolated at home. So I also recommended a full amount. I would go back to the municipality with a recommendation too.
Yes.
I know Family Place has been relying on these funds for many, many years. I remember being on the board at Family Place and applying for the same grant. So it would be nice to see ongoing support so they don't have to
Keep coming. Any thoughts about not offering the full amount to Family Place? Michelle.
Well, you said in your intro comments yourself, Andrea, that in number crunching, you hadn't necessarily granted them the full amount. I had done the same. I had thought that generally they seem like they're doing a great job and have a real need, but I had marked them at 5,000 out of 10 just in an effort to sort of try to make all the pieces fit. One thing I did notice in their budget is there were a few things that they were budgeting for an increase in this year. I don't remember, one was like singing with Mother Goose, or I don't remember what it was exactly. And I thought, well, maybe this isn't the year to be expanding programming. If we need to be cutting some things, maybe that's a way where we can save a few pennies, is maybe not to fund the fullest dream list of everything that could be funded there, but just try to keep them afloat. So I think they're definitely worth funding. I'm not sure I'm still committed yet to funding them 100%, but I think they rank pretty high.
Yeah, I noticed the same thing, Michelle. I think that they do such a fantastic job. They have really healthy financials. And I noticed that within the Family Place budget as well, that there was an increase in the program costs and Mother Goose, which both of them were quite a bit for the year, without really hinting as to why that was growing, almost by double one of them. And that amount worked out to be about $5,000 increase. So I had awarded them $5,000 as well, because in an effort to give more funds to other people, but also to account for, like, without that increase, they would still be offering a robust and healthy program, and financially they looked really well in a good place. So I was the same way, but I would happily award them their full ask as well. So
Would it be appropriate then to just write down the 10 for now, expecting that we will have to trim? I mean, I think we will no matter what. Yeah. Okay. I never know how to say this acronym. BAHORA? Is that how, any horsey people here? Thanks, Steph. BAHORA's application, $12,000 to spruce up the riding ring at the Meadow, to make it a safer space. Michelle.
Okay, well, I'll be honest and say this is one of the two that I wrote down that I really didn't think warranted funding. I mean, I think everybody deserves funding who bothers to apply. I mean, obviously they have a need, and I could see that having a safer riding ring makes a certain amount of sense. I think it's a very niche population. If we thought that the Little Red Church had a small niche population, this is a nicher population than that. And maybe this isn't the year for that, given everything else that we have going on this year.
I completely agree with you. Couldn't add anything more, really. Okay. Dissenting views.
Yeah, I know I'm agreed as well. I would just add, though, it's nice to see the growth in the organization and
Yeah.
have some great management. Although I would like to see a little.
We get about half of what you say, Penny. It's kind of delicious, these little ellipses in the middle. So you would like to see?
Hopefully you're getting the good half.
Oh, 100%. You said it's nice to see that there's more folks and
a horse ridership on the island. I think it's a great way for kids and adults alike to participate. But I didn't, in this case, award any funding either, just based on the need.
okay. Can we move on to light up Bowen's application? An application that is hard every year. It's a big ask every year. And this is a tricky discussion every year. Yeah, I find. So Light Up Bowen's application is for $25,000. I think it was actually 25 to 50, but it's been prepared as 25, which is to really, I guess, grow the Light Up Bowen event to a signature event. And the project encompasses both sort of buying new equipment, but also potentially, as I understand it, hiring extra help for the installation. Okay. And maybe, Aoife, I don't know if you have it to hand. Last year, there was a similar application and we awarded a more nominal amount, right?
Last year we awarded $0. The request was for between 10 and 15. It was again a range was given.
Yeah.
Yeah. So one thing about this application was in the actual project budget as well, there was a BIM grant amount of 20,000. So that's why I went with 25 as the original request. You're right. The request was in a range, but in the actual financials themselves,
it was 20. Okay. Thank you. I'm always happy to jump in. I know Michelle is too.
Did you,
Michael, what do you think, Michael?
Just unmute again, please.
I have background noise here. I've been trying to not let it intrude. This is a difficult one because of the size. And I'm not sure that this program is the right one for it. And the trouble is, I'm not sure what other program is. So again, I think with the funds that we have, if they're asking for 25, we can't get anywhere close to it. And I'm afraid I took the rather ruthless, possibly the view that rather than try and disperse this in penny packages, I would take the hard decision of letting some go, just so that if someone did ask for 4,000 or for 5,000, which seemed totally in line with this program, we could help. When it comes to an amount this size, it would only be a token we offered. And probably that token, like all tokens, gets an average reception by the recipient. So I'm prepared to say no, and I think it needs to go elsewhere. Issue is, I don't know where it needs to go, but I hard decision. It's tough, but no one said this was easy, and I said no, and I rated it a 0.
Well, I mean, I guess potentially where perhaps it belongs and is with the business organization or, business association or Chamber of Commerce, or, I assume those are their biggest sponsors. But I have to say, I agree with you, Michael. And again, I love the event. The one comment I wanted to make, and I'm so grateful to Basha and Paul and to Jewel and the people who put this together, but I know one of the ongoing issues for them is the lack of volunteer help, that we're doing it all ourselves and we need help. And I feel like I'd love this program to become, or whatever this is, this event to become more self-sustaining, so that there's just more bodies and hands involved, and maybe connecting to a business association is going to be helpful. I don't know, but I did say 0 too. Bobby.
I agree with you. I think trying to create kind of more of a sustainable organization through volunteers and creating partnerships in the community. I thought maybe Bowen Tourism was someone to partner up with, to create a destination for people off island to come and to address, maybe a lull in tourism in the winter months. I think it was fantastic last year, leaving the lights up the whole time into January. It was amazing. I definitely will reach out and try and volunteer if I could. And I will. I think that reaching out, and maybe working on developing a committee and working on creating those relationships is a good first step.
With potentially smaller annual asks, each year deciding on a little project that they can fundraise for, as opposed to 25,000.
Focus on creating an organization. So creating, a Light Up Bowen organization, maybe get a board of directors going, get a committee going, partner with the businesses and Bowen Tourism and business associations. And I think you'd get a lot of momentum. It's fantastic. I mean, it's like BowFest, something that is a highlight of our family's, year is going down, and it's fantastic. I don't know though that throwing money at it is what's going to totally make it work. I did put some money in for it because I did appreciate that they're, putting up Canadian Tire lights every year is not going to work. Those things just don't survive. So, and I understand the frustration that they're probably feeling. So I did put a little bit in there because it really benefits everyone on the island to come off that boat in December and drive up the road and see all the lights. It's fantastic. So, to maybe give them something to help out with some equipment, some more, that has some longevity to it. I would be happy to do that, and then encourage them to partner and get some more volunteers.
And be more strategic about those acquisitions as the years go by. Yeah. Michelle.
Yeah, I agree basically with everything that Bobby just said. I put in an earmark for a smaller amount for them. I thought I kicked in 2,000. And my biggest concern was that, they talk about, doing all of this for the community, but it seems like it's moving in the wrong direction when you're hiring professionals come in to sort of stage a community event. A community event is the outgrowth of the community that it comes from. And so I definitely want to see this event continue. I don't want them to give up hope. I thought that the ask was insane. And I do think that this is a case where we could give them a couple $1,000s and it would help with some of the lights or some of the whatevers, or giving somebody a stipend to counteract something or other. I think this is a case where a small amount could make a difference. But I think they're sort of shooting for the moon here, and this is A, not the year to do it, and B, not a way to be sustainable. So I really agree with pretty much everything that everybody said also.
Okay. Penny, did you chime in or not? I can't remember.
No, but I don't have anything to add. Everyone's covered.
Okay. Okay.
Yvonne's comments were similar also, right?
Thank you, Aoife, for reminding me. She has suggested no funding. She's focused this year, she says, on organizations providing ongoing services, not a one-time thing, and agrees with us that it's time for some strategic planning to figure out how this event is going to keep going with a more secure sense of funding and strategy. And I have to say, I think that encouragement from this committee is probably the most valuable thing we could offer, to say it's, it shouldn't just be Basha and Jewel and Paul doing this by themselves. We should be encouraging them to, to build something more sustainable, and then they can put their feet up. Should we put, what are you comfortable with, team? 0 to 2 down as a mark? Okay, see where we end up? All right. The next, a new entrant, Thrive Bowen. Requesting $5,000 to look at the viability of commercial greenhouses on Bowen Island. Very interesting application. And let me offer Yvonne's thoughts so we don't forget her. She's excited about having a new organization support food resilience on the island. She awarded 3,000 of the 5 to encourage them to consider additional fundraising opportunities. Although I must say, from my perspective, that was one of the things I admired about this application, was that they have, already started to fundraise privately against the promise of a potential grant here. Clever, I thought, and are looking at a GoFundMe campaign separately from individual Boweners as well.
Could I, Andrea? I thought it was I thought it was a truly impressive presentation, and I guess the thing I liked about it is a lot has been talked about this type of work on the island, and what they're doing is they're really giving it a sensible review and overview to see whether in fact it is or isn't possible, and to what extent possible. So I think it's a very important piece of work. And I looked at the amount asked and the amount of work that frankly went into the request. And I thought it certainly ticked the boxes from my point of view of the sort of award that this group might make, because it had I think it had achieved a lot already, looked like it was well managed, well thought out, and I thought the amount requested was totally reasonable. So I'm speaking in support of this particular application.
Yeah, I think I'm with you, Michael. I went for 5, understanding we might need to scrape, but so that's, yeah. Michelle, are you ready to?
Yeah, I feel exactly the same. I felt like this application was sort of what I imagine when I think of what the community grants program should be. I mean, we should not be funding the Caring Circle and the other people who are doing important work. We should be doing sort of these interesting things popping up from the community to see what they can do. And that's kind of the whole idea of my understanding of this program. So I was really excited by this one. I wanted to give them the full 5. And I love the fact they're working in food security, and that's been highlighted during COVID as an issue that's significant. And it's also consistent with the municipality's priorities. And so I just thought there was all sorts of good in this one.
Bobby is nodding. Yeah.
I agree. It was a really well put together application. Interesting project. I gave them full 5,000.
Penelope, we're hearing nothing, which means agreement, I'm thinking.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to sit this one out.
Okay, great. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy, as they say. So on to Birch. And Birch's request for 20,000. Birch starting to slide into the Caring Circle family place category of operational funding. Based on the scores given, the group is enthusiastic, it seems, about the work Birch is doing. Yeah. Who wants to start?
So I like the work that Birch is doing. I think it's important. I actually, however, put 0 down for this because I felt like we just don't have $20,000. If there's one thing we can't do is fund anybody at $20,000 this year. And it's significantly more than they asked for last year. And they kind of seem to indicate in the application, like, we have such a great partnership with the municipality. We're doing such great work together. Let's not stop it now, which is like, well, it felt like it was just becoming a dependency. Like they're expecting the municipality to just keep paying. And I understand that it's a tricky place for them because there are not a lot of sources of funding to do what they're doing. And so it has to come from somewhere. But I really feel that this is the opposite of the last one. This is something where the municipality could spend a lot of money providing operating funding for a lot of organizations on Bowen, and then that leaves this program without anything at all to give away.
Michelle, how would you distinguish that from the situation that Caring Circle and Family Place are in?
It's largely just the same, except for they're a little bit newer to it. And so they haven't been requiring this for 10, 15, 20 years, however long. And so it seems like this is a time to try to veer them off into some other source of funding before it becomes part of their core expectation. And I think they're doing really important work. If there's work to be done, I mean, if there's an issue that needs to be worked on Bowen, it's affordable housing. And I'm 100% behind that, but I just don't think this is the program to support them.
Mm. Andrea, if I may?
Yeah, please.
I got to stick to my comments that I made in my email to you, that no one is denying the worth of Birch. I just think that they're getting some municipal support at every possible opportunity. Furthermore, there are programs such as council's special commitments or objectives or campaigns where we could increase resources for Birch. And I think the small grant, this committee is the wrong one for it. I think it's out of scale. And I think there are other ways we can support. Nothing to say that we to diminish what they're doing or how important it is. I think that's a given. I just think this is the wrong thing.
Didn't we send, not last year, was it 2 years ago? Didn't we send Birch back to council?
Yes.
And it
I
all
actually
got
just found
funded?
that- Yeah,
Yeah.
it was to June 2020.
It was last year we sent them back to council. And they received 20 from council from a different pot. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm just looking at my notes here. Birch receives other help from council. Assistance could be provided through council strategic initiatives.
Right.
That was my
But
note.
I'm interested in what happened
I don't
last
know.
year.
So, yeah, so last year, in the same as the 2019 CGAC referred the Birch application to council for alternative funding sources. And the same recommendation went to council, as Steph mentioned, in June 2020. That basically our committee or this committee strongly supported Bowen Island Resilient Communities housing application, but that it was moved and seconded to go for alternative funding sources.
Whoa, sounds like a really good solution.
Well, what we did
but then
last,
how do we sort of stop this cat and mouse game and just can we facilitate them applying directly to council?
I think one of the things was what Michael talked about earlier, Andrea, and that was to communicate to council and to the community. This program is for smaller grants and not large operating grants, such as the one through Birch. And just to answer your question from earlier in terms of the funding that was provided to Birch in a previous year when the recommendation was sent back to council.
Yeah.
Don't have a funding source for funding Birch's expenditure. So it was funded through the accumulated surplus of the municipality. And that's used for funding one-offs. Typically, it's not good practice to use that as a funding source for programs generally on an ongoing basis. But it was an extenuating circumstance. And the other way that we partnership with Birch is there are sometimes grants available out there to charitable organizations. So council has instructed staff to basically acknowledge or receive a contribution on behalf of Birch that Birch has applied for, but otherwise would not have received because they were not a charitable organization. So for example, I think the Bowen, is it the Bowen Community Foundation?
Yeah.
I haven't got, yeah. So they've made funding available and they've released the funding to the municipality, and the municipality in turn
they
has
need a
provided
charitable
it to
organization
Birch in the past.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. So really, if I understand it, Birch gets added to the pile of organizations that need to be able to find their way into an important function of the municipality. We need to fit them into that category somehow. Okay.
Yeah. And I think they are very well understood by council too. So I think they are, frankly, well represented there. I don't think they are without representation and understanding.
This is not a cheeky question. Is this application being made, do you know, Michael, is this application being made with the understanding that this is exactly what might happen? That we'll say, sorry, we can't give you 20, but we sure think council should if they can somehow this year?
I don't think it's that calculated, to be honest. I think there's a grant mechanism out here, and they're taking advantage to see whether they can get it, can be successful. I think they're looking for funds from wherever, and I don't think it's as Machiavellian that.
Oh no, I wasn't suggesting that, but I'm just wondering if we're just going through the motions here. Yeah,
I think they are just looking for funds as and where they can get it, and this is one place.
Okay. So just Yvonne has suggested an award of 5,000. Again, suggesting they should maybe be doing some more fundraising.
I also recommended an award at partial at 10,000. I think that they're doing really great work. If there was another source for that funds through the municipality, through council, that would be great. But I think the work should continue, and housing is in great need on this island.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I did put forward at 10,000.
Bobby, where are you on this?
I agree with what everyone's saying. I did put a small award because I think it's such when you think about a COVID issue, affordable housing is certainly at the top of the list. But that's been an important issue for so many years. So I think they're doing fantastic work. I think it's a wonderful organization. As everyone has said, I wish that they could find more secure funding, permanent funding through the municipality, and know that they have. It's hard to balance wanting to give them money, and I did award them a small amount. I believe it was 5,000, but also recognize that maybe this again isn't the forum for these large, operating awards. So
it is something we've got to come to grips with, isn't it? Because we'll really need to signal that, like, we can't do these big operational awards anymore. That's a big shift for this fund and this committee, if that's where it goes, for sure. Mm.
I wonder if there's a message we can send where, whether it's a limited term of funding or just the emphasis on the road to sustainability. Self-sustainability is important in being awarded one of these grants.
That was a point that Michael made ahead of this meeting, that we might need to look at limiting the number. I know, Michael, you've mentioned several times today the idea of limiting the amount or reducing the amount that can be applied for, but also potentially the number of years. Yeah.
If we look at the ones, when we wrap up this year's session and we're making a series of recommendations to council, one we might like to consider that the emphasis of this program is for smaller, more locally inspired, one-off type of grants. And we could easily say that the grants will be viewed up to an amount of, or considered up to an amount of, shall we say, 5,000, whatever number you decide on, so that we don't get people coming in with honestly, hopelessly large amounts and expectations. And also it makes our work more targeted. So, when in our final wrap-up recommendations to council, perhaps that is something later on we could consider.
Yeah.
Andrea, I'm awfully sorry, but in about 5 minutes, I have to rush off for another Zoom meeting. I don't want to be...
No, we have 9 minutes left. So we've got one more application to get through. I'm going to propose, I guess the answer is we've come up with some loose numbers. And I guess when we would come back together, we can firm them up, would be the idea. Would that work for everybody? Okay. For the purposes of Birch, it's interesting. I mean, I don't think we'd have real consensus, whether it's 5 or 10. I put 16 because I was whittling. Whether it's 20, whether it's 0, I don't really know. Can I just suggest 10 for now, just as a holding place? And then last but not least, tourism, Bowen Island. Asking for 10,000 to support staff costs. This is one that I propose that we not fund. It didn't have the sort of community benefit feeling to it that I was looking for. And it seemed that the shortfall to me in terms of people power or funding could be supported through local business. That was my feeling. But anyway, any other thoughts? Yeah, Bobby.
I also awarded 0 to this request for the same reasons.
Okay. Passionate supporters.
I did award partial funding
Okay.
to Tourism Bowen. I do think there is a community benefit in having someone greeting visitors off the ferry, talking to them about COVID protocols, giving them some direction. And I think that it's about management of people on our small island. And it doesn't, yes, it supports tourism-based businesses, but it also supports us as a community and sharing our values as a community.
Yeah, Michelle.
I guess my feeling is, while I don't disagree with that, I guess my feeling is more that, as I understand from the application, they receive funding for a service agreement from the municipality. And if there are shortfalls in the funding because of cost of living increases or whatever else, the way to address that is through an amendment to their agreement, not through a grant to the community grants program. And so again, I kind of feel this is the wrong tool for this request, or whatever merits it may or may not have.
Andrea, as a tourism person, I've got to be honest that we've probably reached the stage, if I could put my ruthless streak on, if we are going to be sort of totally overrun this summer, because that's just the way it's going to be with local tourism, we are going to have to fund Tourism Bowen, because you just can't have people coming willy-nilly on the island, totally unsupervised, absolutely lost, making absolute chaos in the bit. So it's going to end up by being where it should be, which is a municipal responsibility.
Agree.
And if I don't hope I'm not sounding too harsh, this needs to be put squarely where it belongs and not in the realm of small grants. It needs to be funded. I hold the tourism Bowen it's been extremely difficult for them because the industry has been non-existent locally. They have my every sympathy, and at council I'll certainly speak out to support, because the reason we're going to have to do it if we have huge tourism volumes, because if we don't, there'll be chaos.
Yeah.
So therefore, to avoid chaos and all the embarrassment, we're just going to have to deal with the issue, just as we would do with a leaky sewer or a broken pipe or anything else. It's going to be that simple. So I hope I'm not sounding too authoritarian.
I agree with you, Michael. I don't always get to say that, but I agree with you wholeheartedly on this. Okay. I think we've heard from everybody. Penny, could you live with just marking in 0 for now and seeing how we go at the end?
Absolutely.
Okay. So with 5 minutes left, I just want to quickly, unless you want to do it, Aoife or staff, just remind ourselves what we've penciled in for now. And
do you want
then,
me to go back to the workbook and share that screen again?
yes, please. God, we're efficient.
This is good.
That was a great discussion.
Okay.
Can everybody see this?
Yes.
So actually, just from what you've discussed, you're within $600 of what the budget is right now.
Amazing.
As a draft.
It is amazing. Okay. Although we haven't sort of considered Light Up Bowen as we said we would. So if everybody's comfortable, if we aim to come together for no more than an hour next time to finalize our recommendations and also come back to the discussion about our other recommendations to council about ongoing operational funding. I think an hour might be enough. Any thoughts?
Yep.
Woohoo!
Let's do it.
Okay. Can you remind us, Steph or Aoife, when that is? I know it's in our diaries.
Yeah, it's
I'm a
on
headless chuck at
Monday.
the minute. Monday?
It is on Monday, the 31st at 11 a.m.
Yes, it is.
Perfect.
Right. Thank you.
Okay.
Location,
So let's plan 11 to 12, shall we? Okay. Thank you, everybody. So we need to adjourn this meeting, don't we? Formally in some way. Okay. Steph, how do I do that? I
You
adjourn
just-
this meeting.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Oh, I'm going to make a motion to adjourn this meeting. Would anyone like to second that? Thanks,
I'll second
guys.
it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thanks
Andrea,
for all
thank
your
you.
hard work, Aoife and Steph. You
Oh.
guys are amazing. Really.
thank
Yes,
you,
thank you.
volunteers.
That was a lot of progress. Thank you, guys.
Thank
Okay.
you so much.